Hi Jenny, thank you very much for joining us for our BELISKNER event. It's so great to have you, and how are you today?
I'm doing great. We are at Comic-Con down here in San Diego, so we're a little on the bleary-eyed, tire-eyed, but we're doing great.
So, of course, everybody expects me to ask you what you think about the current situation with Stargate, but yeah, but I don't want to go too deep into this topic, but rather back to the beginnings.
No, I would prefer not to go too deep into that topic. I'm going to say I don't know anything else that everybody else knows.
Yeah.
I was as caught off guard as everybody else. So, I am leaving up to the Stargate gods.
So, as I said, let's go back to the beginnings. I mean, it's been 25 years of Stargate SG-1, and can you believe it? I mean, how did you experience all that time?
So I don't even know, I can't remember where I've told this story, but I stumbled on Stargate by accident in my apartment in whatever the last season was on Showtime, and just found it by accident. And I had seen the movie, but I didn't even know there was a TV show. So I was hooked instantly. So I came as a fan first, and that was in probably 2002. And then in 2003, 2004, just serendipity, I was asked to work on the digital marketing for it. So this was early digital marketing, obviously. And I was working for an agency, and I got to work on the show from 2004 through 2011 as a digital marketer. So primarily not for broadcast, for the home entertainment division, but I got to go on the set and shoot behind the scenes videos and interviews and all kinds of stuff over the years. And it just, of course, made me love it more. So it was pretty amazing. I got to be there for the premiere of Stargate Atlantis and Universe.
So what do you think makes Stargate so beloved and successful? I mean, after such a long time, people are still sticking around, hoping for a new show, celebrating the Stargate franchise. What do you think is it that makes Stargate so special?
Well, I think it's different. I think that, and I say that knowing that Expanse has a team and it's got that family, but Stargate was a bit of a perfect storm of humor, four main characters who got along and obviously enjoyed each other at the time, and the writing was very well suited and perfect for each of those characters. So it's honestly, it's a huge tribute to the writers and to the writers' room that Brad Wright put together, himself included, and Robert Cooper, that what they were able to do was match the style of their actors to the writing very quickly. But I think beyond that, it is a unique chemistry that happened with that writing and the stories that were told, where it's sci-fi, it's humor, it's family, it's got some very deep topics, but it never went dystopian. And I think that there's a place for dystopian. Obviously, I loved the new Battlestar Galactica, and I love a lot of those, but this was a unique chemistry moment, honestly. And if they can recapture that, that would be great.
So often you find yourself between the film companies and the fans, and in case of Stargate, do you think that the fandom has changed over the years?
Oh, no. Okay, technically, by definition, yes, just because of what we're doing right now. So when I first started in 2004, this was not possible, or it was, but not really. So I think technically the fandom has changed in the sense that we are able to connect so much better than we ever did before, which builds on what already existed. And I think every new fan, like Nicole and Evie, who are doing the Wormhole Extremist show with David, and yourself, it's a younger generation. And I have to be honest, every younger generation that I meet is of the same fan, love, commitment, passion. I have to be, and I'm not saying this hyperbolically, there is literally no Stargate fan that I don't enjoy being with and talking with. It could be someone that we disagree on everything else in the world, but we can agree on Stargate. And I think, again, that goes back to that unique chemistry that bled into the fandom. And the fandom, to me, in terms of who that fandom is, that persona, not only it's gotten stronger, I think it has gotten better. I think that outreach, the fact that we can have a fundraiser and raise all this money, everybody cares for each other. And a lot of times, and you hear this from actors, they'll say, oh, the set was like a family. It genuinely was. And that has, by osmosis, been what the fandom has turned into, is a family.
And do you also see that the film companies see the fans different nowadays? Maybe also because of the internet, social media, and everything.
Yes, absolutely. We literally I had a panel yesterday at Comic-Con about this, where we talked about the difference between how the studios used to view fandom. And some studios, MGM, pretty early on paid attention to the fans, but it's still a fight. You can't help it. There's a studio exec's natural inclination is to say, we've done the data, we've done the research, this is what needs to happen. And that's because they have to make the money. They have to do what their bottom line tells them to do while also feeding the creative beast. And that's a hard line to walk. And I think that it is leaps and bounds when we first do it. One of my best friends and I argue over who had the first website, Stargate or Star Wars, or Star Trek, actually. But I think that there's two things happening, if you'll give me a second on this one. Post-COVID, it is a completely different world. And then there's this opportunity for content creators, for small production companies, for fandoms, to do what couldn't happen before. Even though streaming existed, there was still such a unknown there prior to COVID of, is this going to work or not? Now it does. And I think if COVID hadn't happened, that would have been a much longer lead of us getting into it. What that does is that proves to studios, okay, the fans are there. We know they're there. We can see that they're there. They're creating their own content. Look at what they're doing. They're showing up in droves for a virtual. That means they can actually bank literally on that, and they can talk about that. I think where the fight still is to prove that fandom will spend the money on what you're talking about. And unfortunately, that, I hate to say it, but that is the bottom line. And we can do all of our hardest, and I mean, look at 25th anniversary, there are so many fans doing yourself, David, companion app, individual fans that are doing Irene with 365 Days of Stargate, which was just an enormous commitment, and Kirsty. But I think it's still difficult to convince the bigger studios to see the benefit of the long-term relationship. And that's why I was asking you to give me a second on this, is that all of what I said before is important. And it's different. It's radically different. But it is the long-term relationship that will pay off. And it's hard sometimes to convince a studio to spend that time.
So, is there still something that surprises you about Stargate or Stargate fans?
Yeah, what I think is fascinating is I still get chills when I hear about somebody who's gone into a particular career because of Stargate, or it has healed something for them in a family or themselves because of Stargate. It doesn't surprise me, but it just gives me chills, and it's like, oh my God. It just reminds me at that moment why this is an important show, and it's an important fandom because of what can be done and what fans do for each other. And then honestly, the other thing that continually surprises me is the generosity of the actors. We're all going to GateCon, and it's hard because COVID is still an issue here in the United States as it is elsewhere, and it's hard for people to do that and commit to go someplace. And fans, the same thing. It's hard to say, okay, I'm going to go be with a bunch of people in an enclosed space. And GateCon is being able to do that because actors are showing up.
So, running Stargate Project DE, we realized that when Stargate Command came on and new books were announced and new merchandise were announced, it was always something like our readers contacted us and they said like, do they forget about the German market, or the non-native English natives market in general. And is there something that non-English speakers could do to make the companies aware of them? Say something like, we're still here, we want merchandise too. I mean, this is something that always comes up when something is announced and we are like, we can't do anything about it.
No, I know. And it's really frustrating. I know for the global market, I started my career in the global international market. And so I always have a real commitment to try to get beyond that initial quote unquote 2 territories. But I think there are 2 things that can help. And I wish there was more. But just to repeat something that I've said before, and I know it isn't much of a help, or it certainly doesn't make anybody feel better, but part of the problem is that international licenses are a very big mess. Not mess, very complicated, snarled licensing. And MGM in particular is having to unsnarl and recommit or relicense one by one. So I really want to call out the licensing and merchandising team at MGM, because they're trying really, really hard to figure all of that out, to unsnarl what was pre-COVID, what can we do to get out there? And then the distribution side is pretty much doing everything they can, like with Australia, the contract they just did, trying to get it to the other territories that we weren't able to do with Stargate Command. So having said that, the 2 things that I think are the best opportunity for any territory, and I say territory because studios group certain countries together. Germany is not one of them, but just for your global audience, there are quote unquote 22 to 27 territories around the world that we distribute to. We meaning the entertainment industry. And when we talk about territories, we're talking usually about language groupings. So that's just for people to know that it tends to have no country boundaries. It has more to do with language barriers. So I think the old standby, which is get on social media and make sure that you are specific in your call outs to Big Finish, to the to licensing and merchandising at MGM. Just say, at MGM Licensing and Merchandising, we would love to have more German language products. We know that this is hard, but just so you know, we're here, because that they see it. Marketing department sees that, the research department sees it, and every quarter they'll go to their department and say, hey guys, there was a rise in sentiment, and I cannot emphasize how important that is. There are people who pay attention to that, a lot of attention to that. Then the second thing that I recommend is that you find your in-territory partners, so in Germany, in France, in Australia, in Japan, in Brazil, partners who are doing the work for Big Finish, etc., for MGM. And usually you can find that in a Google search within your own country, saying who has the licenses in Germany for book publishing and who's the partner with. And then you reach out to them, because they're the ones that have the license, or they let the license lapse because they didn't think there was a big enough audience. So that's the 1-2 punch. You go to the parent and say, hey, we love this content, we're here on social. And then you go in territory and say, hey, we're here, we will buy your product. And if you can show numbers for that, and Nicole, you're probably someone who could, you could say, StargateProject.de has the following amount of followers. We have unique viewers. This is who showed up for our 25th anniversary. And then you can pull in France and Italy and Switzerland and Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and say, look, just in this area, this is who we have who would buy.
Yeah, it's funny because, of course, I understand how important the US market and the English-speaking market is, but it's always something is announced and then it's like, and what about the German market, and what about non-English speakers? And
and I'm going to say something that I'm sure my English-speaking bosses aren't going to be thrilled about, but the US market is not what's important anymore. The global market is what's important. And while we are American content creators, and I get it, that's not where, I mean, if we really want to go after the bottom line for the studios, the money is globally. And, again, I'm a bit prejudiced about that because that's a lot of where I started in digital marketing was international. But it's been pretty obvious to a lot of people that global is where it's at. So I think that if there is a window of opportunity, this is one of them. I can't say, and this is the X factor in the equation, is that it still has to reach someone who's willing to listen to that, right?
Yeah.
But if we're not even giving that message, if we're not even out there pounding the drum, which, and again, I'm not saying you guys haven't. You guys have been, as you know, during Stargate Command, it was one of my biggest disappointments that we couldn't reach more territories. That just killed me. And it's not that you guys haven't been sending the message out in droves, but if we want to be specific, which helps, about licensing and merchandising or distribution of the shows on streamers, if you're specific, it helps.
Okay.
It helps a lot.
Okay, that's really an interesting insight. And one final question is, if you could do anything with the Stargate franchise, what would you wish for in the upcoming years?
Okay, in my blue sky, and I love you for asking me that because no one's ever asked me that before.
Okay, really?
Yeah, mainly because I'm usually the one that's asking fans that. So I've thought about this a lot. In my blue sky, there would be a marriage of the universes where Brad's universe kicks off a new chapter, and it is Amanda, Jack is retired. We have kind of a running joke back to the very first episode. He's retired. He's watching the stars. Amanda is now a general, and Dr. Jackson is now semi-retired, like chair emeritus at a university in Europe or South America, doing what he loves. Teal'c has a family and kids and has gone to college, graduated, and they're brought back to help kick off another chapter. And it ties into the film universe not having to be a reboot, quote unquote. I would love that. If we could bring everything together and then kick off a new chapter of kind of what Wyvern Gaming was doing with the Stargate Phoenix idea of there was so much storyline that could have been pursued. And it could even be something like you could do a short limited series on individual characters and where they're at. And so you'd have a limited series where there would be one episode dedicated to each character, where they're at. And then at the end of that would be the kickoff to this new chapter. That would be my blue sky.
This sounds really great, and I think that would make many fans happy.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a fan, so I tend to go for the blue sky. Best thing I would love to see. Now, what I think they're actually going to do, that's a whole nother discussion for another time.
Who knows? So
who knows?
Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for joining us for this event.